So that first step of development, this is what you actually see being constructed now, is preparation for 5 additional gates to the west. And that'll bring the total gate count up to 30, 25 in the central concourse, 5 in the west concourse. At that next step, when additional gates are needed, the apron can be expanded and additional concourse added to bring the total gate count to 12 on that west concourse. Of course, everything that has been planned for the terminal and concourse expansion now is being done with that mindset that there will be a time to expand to 12. So that can be done more efficiently than if it was just brand new construction. Then a little bit further down, no specific date on this, but if and when any additional airlines might come in and need additional terminal space, gate ticketing space or baggage space, then the terminal can be expanded one incremental step on the east side prior to when ultimately, again, this is looking outside that planning horizon of 2030, there can be another concourse constructed to the east, bring as many as 9 additional gates there. So that then now you're at 46 gates. It's not the number you saw on that table because, again, this last step is considered to be just outside of that planning horizon. But we wanted to make sure in the master planning process to make sure that you can get to that point without, you don't want to build something here that you would ultimately have to tear down just to accommodate that kind of growth. So we want to plan the ultimate master plan with that in mind. And importantly, if you look at the overall capacity of that airfield configuration that we presented moments ago, and you compare it with the overall capacity of this terminal illustration with 46 gates, they're pretty much in balance, which is a very good thing. It's never good when you have an airfield that can sustain a whole lot more operations, but you can't build your terminal anymore, or vice versa. So this plan marries the two pretty nicely, that the two stay in a proper balance. Just a couple of quick renderings that the folks who are now contracted with Southwest Airlines, Corrigan Associates, is their design architect. These renderings were prepared by them a little while back, preliminary renderings, just showing a couple of shots of inside the terminal. Again, preliminary, and you can tell intentionally at the time a lot of design elements weren't finalized or anything like that, so don't expect you to pick this up and go look in the terminal in 2015 and say, wait, it doesn't look exactly like this. But neat outdoor areas as you're entering from the extended roadway, which I'll show you a picture of momentarily. Some neat dramatic effects, some neat design coming forward on that. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see that project come up from the ground. All right, so now pushing a little bit further out still on the land side. Everything that has to support that terminal operation especially. Couple of things that we know, and I'm going to break this down now into a couple of different topics. First, looking at the curbside at the terminal, and then we'll talk a little bit about parking, and then we'll talk a little bit about rental car facilities as well. The terminal curbside, the main issue, as any of you who have flown out of the airport would know, those curbsides can get congested during peak hour especially. There's congestion at that upper level of the curb, which is especially the area in front of the dominant Southwest Airlines ticket area. And then on the lower level, underneath the garage, as it's shown here, it can get congested where the rental car, parking shuttles are, et cetera. Now, with the construction of the terminal, very intentionally, the terminal expansion is coming out in this direction and does provide some additional curb space, up to 220 feet of additional curb that will help alleviate congestion on that upper curb. And then even in the longer term, with future expansions, there can possibly be even an additional couple hundred feet to help with that congestion. Now, operational changes have already happened to help on the lower level operation, just kind of enforcing operations, policing operations, if you will, to make sure that the commercial vehicles are moving through at the pace they're supposed to and not taking up more space than they're supposed to. They're not queuing up too many cabs down there at the same time. Has already helped with congestion, and there is one other operational benefit that will come with some rental car things I'll mention momentarily. So there are some improvements coming on the curbside operation. Parking, I know you know, has been limited and a challenge. So we know that additional parking is definitely necessary. It's already at capacity. And boy, in peak season, you know that because if you live in this area, you know that people have been parking in curbs or parking in DoubleTree's parking lot and trying to fly out. Even off-airport parking can reach capacity during peak seasons. So right now, you're aware, I think, that there's a major parking garage construction project coming. That will provide ultimately an additional net gain of 2,500 spaces. And even during that construction process, there's a bunch of parking over what was called Eco Park 2. That's been expanded to provide over 100 new public parking spaces during the construction process. So there will be a significant increase in the total number of spaces available once that parking garage is opened up. It does require the relocation or the realignment of the roadway. But that was done in full awareness, of course, of what the goals were of the West Concourse expansion as well, and to help increase that upper level curb so that reduces congestion on the upper level curb. Rental car facilities, you may or may not always experience what their struggles are, but they have struggles with at least a couple of the companies of parking where they can park some of the aircraft. I'm sorry, the cars once they've all been returned. There's just not quite enough space on airport. Some of them are off airport, but you've seen it at Intercontinental with the construction of a consolidated rental car facility, and there is recommendation for consolidated rental car facility at HOU as well, which combines all of the rental cars into a single facility, really improving the customer experience if you're flying in and renting a car. To have a single shuttle that takes you to a single location where you can access any of the car rental companies. One of the great things that happens with that, though, is the reduction of the number of shuttle trips to and from the airport. So all the rental cars that are over on the east side of the airport now, or even the ones that are on airport right by the terminal complex, no longer have to route onto Airport Boulevard to get over to the terminal curb and drop off and pick up. You have a single shuttle that reduces the total number of trips onto the curb, therefore reducing congestion as well. And with this location, with a quick, with a road that can feed directly into the areas where you're going to pick up and drop off, less traffic on Airport Boulevard in general. So if you look at each of these projects kind of in one big picture, this is what your overall terminal area begins to look like in the ultimate development. Relocation of taxi staging a little bit further out, but with a road that can feed into the pickup area, so again they don't have to go noodle around on Airport Boulevard to get into the terminal complex. Same with the rental car facility, new parking garage. This illustrates the whole area being dedicated to parking. Right now there is a cargo and provisioning facility there, so you see a bifurcated parking lot right now. You see parking down here, you see parking up here with the provisioning facility in the middle. Long term, that provisioning facility, we have a space identified where that can be relocated, and that whole area can become a surface lot, and again the operations could be reevaluated, or the parking needs can be reevaluated to determine if surface lot there is sufficient, and if it's not, that is a perfect place factored into the master planning process where another structured parking lot could go to complement, for example, the ultimate concourse build-out if it does get to that point outside the planning horizon. Now, what you'll see in 2015 is not all of that. What you'll see in 2015 is basically illustrated here with the concourse expansion, terminal and concourse expansion, the new parking garage, relocation of the roads, and a new central utility plant immediately adjacent to it. So that's the terminal area. Quick rendering of the parking garage provided or prepared by the design engineers, Walker Parking and the design architect with that for the parking garage. Okay, now getting on the roads. How do you get to the airport? How congested is that? We know that the roads around the airport can, and especially the intersections, can be frustrating around here. So the intersections, we did volume calculations, we collected data, did future calculations based on our passenger enplanements forecast. First, to make sure that the arterial roads can sustain the future forecast, and they can. It will get in the out years, 2030, Will you see more cars? Yes, but is it a level of service of D or F? No, we don't believe it gets that bad. Intersections, though, can be difficult. Or they already can be, and they would get more difficult with that kind of increase in traffic. So right now, the airport and telephone intersection, the level of service is already very low. Ditto with your Monroe and airport intersection. We have recommendations. I'll show you those in a couple of slides of some lane reconfigurations to increase capacity, especially in the turning movements, that will help alleviate those issues. Not bad right now at Broadway. Or you may recall in a previous master plan, the thought was to really create a main entrance, a huge entrance with, or the celebrated, we call it ceremonial entrance of Broadway. But with that not being the focal point of this master plan, that intersection would perform pretty well through the forecast period. And then I'll show you a recommended new intersection here and explain the reason for that. First, Airport Boulevard and Telephone Road. Just see some increased capacity for, again, left-hand turning lane movements and on the telephone road. So all three of the dominant flows of traffic, increased flow of turning movements. Similar thing at Airport Boulevard and Monroe Road, both left-hand turn and right turn on Airport Boulevard recommended to increase capacity and throughput there. And then I'd mentioned how you already have more vehicles parking in Eco Park 2 because you've got this bifurcated lot. The cars to get into this parking all flow in and out up in this general area. They come in and they come out here. This is putting, this can and will, is already putting kind of a strain on access in and out. And one of the real operational issues with that is that cars going out of here trying to go west on Airport Boulevard don't have a good way to do that. They have to come down, do a U-turn to go back to the west, et cetera. So the recommendation here is to create an intersection that matches with Glencrest. So a little bit of a jog in the road to exit that connects to a lighted intersection at Glencrest. This has been modeled for future operations to make sure that it doesn't impede Airport Boulevard traffic. You also had to get kind of parallel to Glencrest, or I'm sorry, even with Glencrest, so you avoided this ramp that comes into the terminal area. You have to be able to get just far enough east of that so that you can get around it. This has been coordinated with the FBO's improvement and development plan there as well. Now, and if this section that's in purple is where the cargo provisioning facility is, cargo and provisioning, and if and when that is moved elsewhere on the airfield, that would allow this road to even come all the way down into the parking area and provide better access all the way into it. Can't do that right now just because the operation associated with this needs direct airfield access, and you don't want to have a public road crossing to complicate that. And this is just a close-in view of what that intersection may look like. Okay, and then throughout the rest of the airport, there are substantial projects going on. Mario alluded to a number of them. FBO facilities are expanding and improving, which is all very exciting to watch. If you look at the overall demand for growth there are still a couple of pockets that, a couple of areas of land that can still accept or can still accommodate some growth. The main two areas is what we kind of refer to as the south quadrant, there will be space available. A little bit of this space would not be available until 1735 was truly decommissioned, so it would be a little bit further down the path, but there's certainly acreage available in the south quadrant with some good airfield access, and then there can be a little bit more land available for development with great airfield access here, but again, that one also, really none of that would be available until 1735 is decommissioned. So on airport, there's not a lot of land there, but in some ways, I guess you can say it's a good problem to have because you've got a lot of activity and a lot of interest always at Hobby, demonstrated both by the ongoing FBO projects and improvements, as well as the fact that a lot more interest even for that land. Okay, so overall, this is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this board. This is really just kind of a recap of the overall on-airport development project. We've got that board over here, so you can get a close look at that after we finish the presentation. Now, what does this mean in terms of what you hear and what you experience if you live in this immediate area? I'm going to start off just with a simple illustration of relative noise levels. We talk, and when we're doing airport planning, we talk in the sense of DNLs, day-night average volume, basically. It's a mathematical, scientific calculation that blends all the operations at an aircraft, at an airport, depending on time of day, size of aircraft, weather conditions, seasons, etc., and basically gives you an average or an overall way to quantify how significant the noise is. And most of the FAA documentation all pushes you towards, at the airport, really paying attention to that range of 65 DNL to 75 DNL. And trying to, having to be very cognizant of types of development within those contours, that range of contours, 65 to 75 DNL. I'm going to show you what those contours are in the next slide. First, just real quick though, the good news is aircraft are getting quieter, believe it or not. 60s and 70s, aircraft were very loud. I mean, you get close to the jet sound on a departure in the 60s and 70s aircraft, and it could hurt the ears. Right now, 737s that you're seeing a lot of at Hobby have gotten substantially quieter, and we're still on a downward curve. The new aircraft, 737 MAX, that will be introduced soon, those continue to get quieter. A lot of different ways we can talk about those, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, ways of defining the volume of the level of noise. But in the interest of moving forward, this is a picture that illustrates the noise contours from the previous master plan. 2000 time frame, when the high level of operations were occurring that I showed you in that first graph where we gave you our projections for future activities as well. And pay attention to the light blue is a 65 DNL, manageable. You hear aircraft, sure, but it doesn't interrupt speech really as much. 70 DNL, much closer to the airport, and if you're standing on the airfield, of course, 75 DNL is where it's really very loud. So now look what happens though when you jump from 2000 to what we've now modeled for the noise in 2011. See a significant drop in those noise contours, a significant shrinkage. That's due in large part, mostly, because of that drop in operations that we talked about again in those first slides. It's also because of the improved aircraft, quieter aircraft, and has a little bit to do with some of the modeling that the way we had to model this. It's all, I can let Bruce and Ohan speak to this by the boards after the meeting, if you want to get into the details of the FAA requirements or the way that the models are provided that are used to explain this. But they can go into further detail to show you why these shrank so much from 2000 to 2011. It's great news, and it is mostly from the drop in operations and the quieter aircraft. Now, going forward, they'll grow again a little bit as operations increase, but not ever to that level that you would have seen in the 2000 time frame. So this goes all the way out to 2030. What you see here is a little change in the shape. Pay attention to the fact that in 2020, our models still assume 1735s in the mix. 12 left, 30 right has not been upgraded. You jump to 2030, that noise contours change a little bit because that airfield configuration changes. You now have the two runways, the parallel runways are the dominant. 1735 dropped off. So in terms of land use off the airport, you can get a nice close view on the board that we have charted on the right-hand side of the room to show categories of land use and how those lay underneath those same contours. Just in case you want to go find your house or your business and say, well, where am I in that whole conversation of noise exposure? This is a 2030 contour that we've put the board up for. We're interested in that for a variety of reasons, not just because of the immediate impact of noise, but we're also just very interested, and Mario's made sure that we've made a point of the fact that this airport is in the middle of a community. Every airport is, and we want to be very cognizant of that relationship. And it's been a high priority of Mario and his leadership team. So we've looked carefully in this master plan at what land uses are in the general area of the airport, what some of the opportunities and constraints are that may or may not have everything to do about the airport. We aren't, and HAS is not able to just spend money how they want to off airport property. There are specific rules by the FAA about how you can use aviation monies to do projects on or off airport. So there's not as much they can do to immediately control development or influence development off airport, and yet there are some things that can be done to help developers seek developers for development with incentives to develop or redevelop land if there's land that should be redeveloped. So we went through a whole exercise, especially Patty and Angela again, on the land use planning side, to look at what opportunities and constraints there are out there. Where are the areas that most need where are the greatest opportunities for development or redevelopment, and then what's preventing that from happening, and what are some strategies for improving that in the future. Not only strategies just in terms of development, but strategies in terms of incentive programs. What incentives are there through the state, through the city, community, that can indeed incentivize and encourage future airport development? Main areas that were identified as potential areas for development that could have the greatest impact are some of the major intersections that you see with the arterials, either with the airport, with the interstate, or with other arterials. And so there are a lot of neat opportunities that I know Patty and Angela would love to speak with you. We didn't redo this board, but I think that the board over here would be a pretty helpful tool to be able to speak to that. So I want to encourage that kind of conversation. Now I'm going to ask Jarrett Simmons, who's the director of the planning department at Houston Airport System, to talk to the last remaining slides, beginning with something that was done in the previous master plan as well that you may remember or may have heard of if you were here during that master plan, called the hobby image plan, and how that too can be a neat tool. The image plan then set a framework that looks at ways from kind of an infrastructure perspective of how some of these arterials, how some of the streetscapes can really be improved as well, to again improve that customer experience as you're driving to and from the airport. So Jarrett's going to speak a little bit about that, but even more so some of the short-term plans and concepts that you will see taking place soon. So Jarrett Simmons, please.
As Max mentioned, during the last master plan in 2003, there was a document called an image plan that was created along with the master plan. What that showed was possible ideas for improving the streets and streetscapes in the neighborhoods outside of airport property. But as Max mentioned, the airport we have our hands tied in what we can do off of airport property. The FAA calls it diversion of funds if we spend money off airport property. But what we hope will happen, Hobby has a new management district, and they have a copy of this image plan, and we hope that over the next few years they'll be implementing some of these ideas for streetscaping throughout the neighborhood, even away from Hobby Airport. But what we can control areas right around Hobby Airport. So one of the things I'm going to talk about that will be happening around the time the terminal comes online is streetscaping, landscaping that will be installed along Airport Boulevard between Telephone and Monroe. There's a board in the back there, and we're going to put literally thousands of flowers and trees and palm trees along Airport Boulevard between Telephone and Monroe. The Public Works Department has agreed to provide us with water for free, so we can landscape, maintain this landscaping. But Houston Airport System will put in the flowers, we'll put in the trees, and we will put an irrigation system for this. And this will come on around the time the terminal, we hope around the time the international terminal goes into service. Also, this brochure, this flyer, there's copies of this outside if you want to take this home. And here's another kind of rendering that we pulled together showing how some of the streetscaping will look.
Yeah, check that. It's actually a video.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot about that. Yeah. So this is a rendering without the terminal of how the streetscaping along Airport Boulevard will look. Oh, yeah. Our horticulturalist put in bird sounds in there just for added effect. And she did a really good job. She created this video in less than 48 hours, so she did a pretty good job. So you have some very good city employees out there. But it's going to be very impressive. She's already started doing some of this type of work up at Intercontinental. But I think it's going to be very impressive at Hobby, because Hobby, as Director Diaz mentions to us all the time, is very industrial look, has a very industrial look. It's very hard, a lot of hard surface, a lot of concrete, and you hope the flowers and the trees and the shrubbery will soften up the image a little bit. In addition, Atlantic Aviation, as part of their renovation expansion program along Airport Boulevard, will be putting in additional trees around and landscaping around their property. Another thing that will be coming in will be a new entry monument to Hobby Airport. This is a rendering of it. Actually, I just got pictures today of the sign that will go up at Intercontinental, and this sign is pretty impressive. It's made of stainless steel.
Go to the next slide.
Oh, you put it in already. Okay.
Where's following?
Next one. Oh, okay. Here's an actual photo of the sign that will be installed at Intercontinental in 2 weeks. And around the time the terminal goes in, the international terminal goes into operation, a similar sign for Hobby will be installed here, and it will look exactly like this, except for it'll say Hobby, WMP Hobby Airport. Okay. Oh, yeah, and it looks great at night. Yeah, it looks except for the T.
That's not a typo. There is a person standing in front of that.
Yeah. This photo was taken 2 days ago at the sign shop in Dallas, where it was being assembled and they were testing everything, and evidently something wasn't working right. But we'll make sure we test the sign thoroughly before we install them. And then now we're going to go into questions and answers. I'm going to bring Mario and Max back up to answer any questions. Also, we have a lot of other experts in the room. We have our consultants in the room who can answer land use and noise questions. We have our rental car experts in the room. We have our properties people in the room. We have a couple of our friends from Southwest. I don't know if they'll be willing to answer any questions about their project. But and the FAA is also here. So if you have any question, we hopefully will have someone in the room that can answer the question.